Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. My name is Douglas Mallette, and I am the host for today's show. Most of you know who I am, so I'm not going to go into too much any detail about myself because today's show is not about me. I have a very special guest today, Mr. Kevin Tilsner, who is a local of the Philadelphia area and recently attended a very special conference that we are going to have a discussion about today. So, Kevin, thanks for taking time to be here. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you very much, Doug. I also appreciate being on. It's great to know that there's such a huge audience that's actually at my fingertips at this moment. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a large listener base, so unquestionable. So, let's talk a little bit about you for a moment. Let's learn who Mr. Kevin Tilsner is. So, go ahead and take a few minutes. Tell us where you are, how you got into the movement, when you got into the movement, yada, yada, yada. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. I guess it originally started when I was attending a free showing of the first film back on the Ides of March, I think in like 2007, 2008, and around there, at a place called Germ Bookstore in Fishtown, which is a little subsection of Philadelphia. And due to all the awesome people that I met there, like Mark Passio and of What on Earth is Happening, he introduced me to some other people, such as um, the Truth, Freedom, and Prosperity Movement and the Tesla Science Foundation. And I was also through then getting involved with the Zeitgeist Movement itself, specifically with gentlemen like Mike Randazzo, who is the chapter lead of the Philadelphia group. He and I have on occasion made it down to like First Friday in Philadelphia and handed out DVDs. I'd actually just even had an opportunity to do that the other week. It was actually the same week that I had done the Earthship seminar, where I had the opportunity of meeting Michael Reynolds, who, like I'd mentioned, I'm hoping people have known who he is, but if you do not know who Michael Reynolds is, your best place to go to would be to see the movie Garbage Warrior. It's a really great spot to figure out the basics of where we're starting at for this conversation.
All right, cool. So you ended up going to a seminar called the Earthship Seminar, which most people in the movement, in fact, a lot of people around the world understand the Earthship concept. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we're on a gigantic spaceship traveling through the known universe. It just so happens that this spaceship is a biosphere that we call Earth, and so the way to sustainably use the planet for the longevity of the human species and things like that are well, a relatively known concept to quite a few people, although not everybody practices it. But of course, that's where we come in. And so let's talk about that seminar. Where did you hear about it, and what really motivated you to get there?
One of the other groups that I also work with is called Love Loving Love Inc., and they can be found on the internet as well. But they helped get this seminar together and contacted Michael Reynolds and got him out there. And they are trying to build the first Earth ship in Philadelphia, like the first urban Earth ship, one that's actually built inside of a city. And it's very difficult to do that thanks to the various bureaucracies and red tapes and unions. And like there are no tire laying unions. There's a bricklayers union, but not a tire packing and laying union. And that's part of what goes into the building of an Earth ship, is to like pack dirt into a tire for thermal mass and build these tires around into the wall of your home.
So the tires plus dirt act as a insulator using a little bit of nature and a little bit of waste.
It doesn't just do that. That's the fun part about it. It also acts as a kind of thermal collector, because it just sets in a whole bunch of like thermal mass is what he calls it. And because it sits in there, like that heat sits in there, when the temperature, say around midnight or so inside of one of these homes, drops to a certain level, the that heat will then start to bleed out of the heat or out of the tires just due to natural physics.
Okay, I see. Go ahead, keep going.
There is also a way to like keep your home heated in all of this uh, through the use of greenhouses in the front of the home. And due to these greenhouses, it also helps you create a bunch of food. And one of the ways that you even keep the food being produced is by having your waste management all processed through your plants. It actually is an amazing concept to see such a decentralized, all in one home, like kind of conglomeration of ideas. And when all of these things are combined, it literally gives you a way to get off the grid and sustainably stay off the grid for the rest of your life, not needing bills, electricity, the whole nine yards.
All right, well that's definitely the kind of thinking that we aspire to. I mean, unfortunately, we get smacked with those labels of centralization and all the isms that go with it, and then you turn around and look what we actually advocate, and it's about decentralization, true personal independence, being able to live well within one's home and be able to provide all of your own needs without having to be beholden to a corporation to sell you power or another corporation or government to provide you water, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the height of decentralization and independence, wouldn't you say?
I couldn't agree more, and that's kind of what actually got me involved in this, like specifically looking for these sorts of things. Like back at the turn of the century, I was just looking into like things like geodesic domes with like solar power, and once you start to learn about the different ideas that have evolved past there, it really gets interesting. Like they even use like a double greenhouse method, not just for the added warmth, but also for the added um, food generation factors. He even mentioned it himself that, like Michael Reynolds himself specifically said that he lost his architecture license, so he has to call it biotecture because, and most of the time when he looks at these houses, he's always trying to figure out, like he says, half of the thought process of what he's doing with his house is how can he get as much food as possible out of it. And when you have that sort of um, like I said, combined thought process of having so many different things capable, it really becomes almost, as Michael Reynolds makes it sound, it's almost magical out in the desert, the way he puts it, because you've got all these things that you can go like do basic foraging if you really want meat. He winds up collecting like rattlesnakes and so on and so forth. But his house provides bananas in the middle of the winter.
Bananas in winter. That's definitely different.
It's kind of hard to believe, and especially when you toss in other greenhouse ideas that like he's always evolving these ideas, and that's the amusing part about it. And one of his ideas was even to get away from a flush toilet and go to like a solar powered toilet, and essentially it acted like a super cooker of it to basically cook out all the bacteria, and essentially in the end it winds up becoming nothing more than literally a clean dirt.
So then that, of course, if I'm following the proper line of thinking here, would be used for compost or something like that, wouldn't it? So then you can grow other things within a greenhouse or maybe just outside of it, things that might not be so greenhouse friendly, but at least you can then help create some compost to fertilize and keep the soil up that's right in your backyard, right?
Exactly. And that was just during one of the models. He then got out of that model in the evolution of it and went back to a flush toilet design because he wanted to start using the waste products as part of like you had just mentioned and in but on the interior a reclamation process that adds towards the feeding of all of these plants.
All right, cool. So that's one aspect of the seminar. I have to assume that there were a whole bunch of bases touched, so let's keep going.
Well, not only was he talking about the different aspects of the the sustainability solutions that you need to have it all involved. Like he brought up wind power and how he originally got away from using some solar collectors because he wanted to not give money to like the big oil that actually owns most of the solar um, building processes. And due to that, like you said, he got himself into trying to create his own wind turbines and such. And one of them got even so big, they actually had to build a building around the turbine just so that it didn't like almost take off on him. It was collecting so much wind and it creating so much electricity that he never had to worry about it for that lot specifically.
Does he
He was
have
even able.
paperwork and does he, sorry about that. Does he have paperwork and information that talks about that wind turbine and kind of shows some of the statistics on it? Because sometimes the scientific skeptic in me wants to say, okay, that sounds great, but where's the validation that shows what he was actually generating with that?
I unfortunately do not have that information. I would have to recommend that you contact him. I'm pretty sure he'd be able to answer a lot of those types of questions. I know they do have a contact site on their earthship.com website. Unfortunately, I don't have that. I apologize for not being a little bit more prepared in that area. But there are other aspects to this when it comes to these sorts of things that like they don't exactly have that sort of wind turbine generation stuff in say their Haiti version of the Earthship, which is just really meant for like collecting water to make sure it can be then purified and then used for drinkability, and that's all built into the home. And this was part of his disaster relief project that he went down to Haiti to take part in. And a lot of people came together in those respects in their community to build these homes and to learn how to build these homes. And they did so in what reminded me, because I live in Pennsylvania, it reminded me of like the very like the Amish house raising communal efforts that they have in this part of the world.
Oh yeah, I can see where that ties in. Can you explain that a little bit for people who might not understand exactly what that Amish collectivism is?
Sure. Basically, they are like a subset of Christianity who is not really into the ideas of using most modern technology. And when, say, a young couple gets together and gets married and they need a place to live, they just basically get together one day, the entire community, and they raise a home using like hammers and nails, and they just build this whole home over a short period of time. And it's this sort of communal effort that was uh, almost exactly mimicked in the idea of building these earth ships in order to rebuild part of the community that was destroyed during the Haiti earthquakes.
So how long does it take to build one of these Earthship homes?
It depends on how much time you put into it. Some people have, like, you can actually contract him to even do some of the work and such, or like his team and such. But you're really talking about building these things on your own and putting that power into your own hands. So you have to learn how to uh, take care of all these sustainable systems all on your own, as well as learn how to like really put your back into it and take a sledgehammer and slam dirt into these tires as hard as you can. And it's not an easy process. It's not difficult, but it is worth it. Obviously, in the end, when you're paying around $100,000, $150,000 for, say, a typical home today, on the normal market. And then if you look at Earthship, where that same kind of money is then put into it to have the faculties of being able to take care of four people in the home, like two adults, two children, when all of these things are combined, and it only costs, say, the $150,000 once again, and then there's no more bills involved, like ever, it becomes a real it almost becomes totally obvious as to why people are getting into these sorts of ideas.
Well, yeah, that's what true sustainability kind of is supposed to be. So you do it once and it lasts, at least a generation or two, or a couple, or a lifespan or two. Go for 80 to 150 years would be ideal for some basic things. We can even do a lot longer. I mean, the concepts of what you're talking about seem to be able to last a few centuries, provided no natural disasters erode them away, or have issues with that, like water getting into the dirt and turning it into mud and having it wash out. But I'm sure, well, I hope anyway, that those contingency plans have been thought of when it comes to the longevity of, say, an Earthship home to withstand natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, things like that. Are those anything that he addressed at this seminar, something like that?
Oh yeah, a few of those things. As a matter of fact, you put a layer of cement on the outside of these tires in order to protect it the way you were speaking of. And some people worry about off gassing and stuff like that, but most tires, by the time they're used and tossed into a dump, all of that off gassing is usually already even taken care of through just the mileage that's put onto the car. You're saying about after about 10,000 miles or so, most of the off gassing is already done. So those sorts of things are really not. Uh, those sorts of worries are not actually as big a worry as many people put into them as.
Yeah, well, I think it would be a good idea to do some good analysis on that. I mean, that would be an amazing scientific research project for people who are currently in college, for sustainable architecture, or some kind of a degree that focuses on sustainability, to get a hold of this guy and say, hey, let's build one of these houses, except let's put a bunch of sensors and stuff like that in it. And start measuring this stuff and see if there is an outgassing issue, and can we build a simple basic vent to bleed that off where there's no issue. I mean, there's you would start increasing the tech level, because it sounds to me these Earthships are very much on the low tech, good old fashioned human labor, grunt, muscle, and sweat kind of way of doing things. Is that kind of that's the idea I'm getting from it? Is that about right?
Oh, that's for sure. That's the reason why I actually, um, in a lot of ways, because of the cultural background that I personally have become a part of when it comes to, say, the Burning Man groups that are out there. So people understand a little bit about that. There is an entire group of people who get together for an event. Basically, about 50,000 people get together and they build a little tent city out in the middle of the desert. And in doing so, they have a lot of issues, and it all gets torn down at the end, and it all goes home and scatters to the four winds. So part of their thing there is that they want to make sure that um, they leave no trace, which is kind of the exact opposite of the sustainability. But otherwise, their their cultural principles are basically the exact same when it comes to, say, they have a gifting economy and people do things there very much for like art's sake. And as a matter of fact, the Burning Man itself actually gives away one of the most amounts of art grants inside of America as any other. It's like one of the largest art grants that's ever given out.
Yeah, that's in Black Rock, Nevada, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right. Correct.
Right. Yeah, I know people who've been to Burning Man, and I myself would like to go. I mean, sometimes it's labeled as a hippie fest, but well, of a bunch of artists. But there are technically minded people that go there as well and build some pretty elaborate artistic pieces that are technical. It's also just a great way to hang out. But you're right that the social aspect, the philosophical aspect that they have, the philosophy that people who attend Burning Man subscribe to, is a sustainable minded philosophy, and the don't mess up your bed kind of thinking where, they show up, they have their party for however long it goes, and then, like you said, they scatter to the four winds and there's no trace left. It would be nice if a place like that actually had a permanent residency, but all of the buildings and stuff that were erected by the people that were there were sustainable architecture, earthship related things, and stuff like that, so that they do have a return place, so like a little town they can go back to. God, I'm thinking like old Wild West where you set up this old little town, but instead of being wood buildings that rot and get destroyed by the desert, it's these sustainable buildings with the earthship concept.
Yeah, and they could even then do almost along those same Old West style ideas with, say, the way logging industry used to send logs downriver. You could even, if on a flat enough basis, I actually spoke with Mr. Reynolds about this one. I had suggested that you could essentially use the same type of technology that they have in, say, a log flume, which is like an amusement park type of concept, where it basically goes splashing down. But instead, you just simply have a little moat type of thing, and instead of your high-tech version, say in the Venus project, of the maglev vacuum tubes that work as transportation. This would be a very low tech version where you could, like I said, almost have like a log flume type of technology where it transports you around the permanent city, or all of these types of ideas added in further. And that would basically make it so that you wouldn't even need, say, transportation on the automobile level and so on and so forth.
So in a way,
Also cutting down in pollution that way.
right. And so in a way, we're thinking kind of, it sounds to me almost like Venice, Italy, in a way.
Precisely.
All right, so that's a thought process. Of course, now you know my background. I am the high tech super geek. So I'm thinking about this. I'm like, well, that's all nice. I wouldn't want to live in a place like that personally because I think it's way too rustic and can provide more problems, I think, than or at least it's really difficult to put together. But have they considered going just a little more high tech as far as construction principles, like ways to have machines that would punch these things out and pack this dirt and, do things in a way that would be faster? Like, for example, going back to the Haiti disaster relief, do you want to do a bunch of stuff by hand and muscle when everybody that's living there is going through hell in a handbasket? Or do you want to drop a couple of machines and go ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk and start cranking out these buildings as fast as possible so that these people have shelter as quickly as possible? And so has he considered doing a kind of a bridge between 21st century and what he's thinking of?
I would have to say that he has done only as much in the box thinking when it comes to that sort of thing as is necessary uh, for the authorities around him. He has definitely uh, given a direction that is very against the ideas of centralization. And in a lot of the disaster areas specifically, that was the biggest problem, was getting some of these things, these materials transported to the site. So it was a lot easier for kids, for them to actually just pay the kids a bunch of rupees to go out and um, grab the different cans and bottles they would need, because part of the process is even using cans and bottles as like uh, part of the building bricks even as well. Some of it's partially done in like a fancy design by them, say sawing off the top of a bottle, and then that becomes a clear see-through after it's like tied to another side of the same kind of bottle, and those sorts of, it almost becomes a stained glass effect depending on the type of bottles that they use. As a matter of fact, he's even made jokes about how he would like more people to go out and purchase different types of alcohol that happen to have these odd bottles to make sure that they are continuously available for his processes. because even he sees things in a very different way. Like he sees tires as a natural resource because everywhere he goes in the world, there's tons of tires just laying around in like scrap yards or whatever, and all he sees is building material.
Oh, I agree with that. I have no problems with that whatsoever. I see, I mean, that is definitely a resource that can be used. I mean, the tires can do one of two things, right? They can sit in a big pile and gather rainwater and mosquitoes and be a breeding ground for all kinds of nastiness and be an eyesore and difficult to manage and maintain to begin with. Or you can try to find a way to use them in a sustainable way so that they are a benefit and not a detriment to the people. And so that part I totally get. But, like one of the things you had mentioned was, packing the dirt yourself and smashing it into there. I mean, I can see a large scale stamping machine, for lack of a better, if people can get the visual in their heads, and just going punk and just popping that dirt in there with a couple of 1,000 pounds of force that a person is not going to do, but a machine can do in 2 seconds, and get that house built real quick and to a very sturdy level, and and you can even set the pressures to be whatever is the most optimal pressure that the dirt would need to be compacted to, and research can be done on that as well. So, I guess from what I'm hearing though from you is this guy is a little bit anti-tech, and kind of wants to use what we've got, but use it in an old school kind of way. Is that about right?
For the most part, yes. I think he would be open to your idea, especially if it made it so that his workers didn't have as hard a time. I'm sure he would definitely smile at that concept. But in what you were even speaking of is these types of cans and bottles and stuff could be added into, say, the cement process and how they laid cement with the additive engineering in like the 3D printer style of building houses that they had mentioned in the third Zeitgeist film. I'm sure you could add in those sorts of bottles and cans to actually add in those moments of difference that he creates that adds actually a level of a different type of mass for what he's going for in the building project. There are different styles of doing things depending on what you're going for, and that's kind of the beauty of how it's very modular in that fashion.
Oh yeah, and that's definitely good because modular allows you to do, unique building in different areas, different climates, different places of the world that, can cater to that region, that zone. And so that's good. Kind of having the Lego concept of being able to put together what you need based on a few select parts. So that's definitely worth it. So what else did they cover at this seminar? Any other additions?
I would say it's really just about um, creating that solar mass. That was one of the most important things that he was really spoke of. In addition, I think I'm nearing the time where I'm able to wrap this up because the basic concepts I believe we've really discussed, and from here it's really just a matter of which direction things are going to go. I mean, there's a building project out here in just outside of Philadelphia in Bucks County where they want to build a little um, pavilion out of these types of concepts, like a teaching hall for an actual park, Silver Lake Park out here in Bucks County. And there's all, like I said, also the one that they're trying to build inside of Philadelphia with Love, Loving, Love. These kinds of things are really um, some of the basics that he wanted to bring these ideas to the city so that they could then be expanded upon. Like south facing sun was definitely one of the things that he suggested that is always needed because like you can uh, sit out in the sun for 4 days and die out in the desert, or depending on how you encounter the sun. But if you encounter the sun, say in Alaska, you can build yourself a south-facing uh, igloo, and that little bit extra sunlight that goes through will keep you alive. And it was that south-facing sun that he noticed was apparently a large issue with a lot of the um, designs of the houses in Philadelphia because many of them were not actually facing south in ways that would be easy for a retrofitting of a lot of the houses. But that all has to do with like the area that you're in.
Oh yeah, well they didn't think about that kind of stuff back in the day when they were cookie cutter throwing together these places up and kind of haphazardly building cities on the fly as they grew. You know, they're not looking at sun angles and maximization of solar potential or any of that. Any other wind facing systems? What are the dominant wind vectors that happen in a particular region so that maybe you can, design a house to capture and filter wind around it in a way that helps cool your house during the summer and maybe warm it during the winter or whatever the case may be. I mean, nobody at the time weren't ain't good old school Philadelphia. They were building bells and cracking them, but they weren't doing a good job of thinking about sustainable architecture.
Yes, that's exactly it. Um,
But I see this as
yeah,
it's a good bridge. I mean, you've got there are members of the movement and people in general. One of their arguments against the high techie is that they're not high tech and they're not interested in high tech. And so then we get the argument thrown at us, well, what are you going to force me to live into one of these cities and stuff like that? Which of course is wrong. No, nobody's going to force anybody to live in a high tech city. But this Earthship option is just as viable. I'd like to see additional research on it. That's the scientist in me would like to see additional research on it to see some of the numbers that are involved. What are these savings? How are they being implemented? But that's just this guy teaming up with some universities to say, hey, let's do some real serious statistical analysis here and see what kind of numbers we're getting. What are we really saving? What kind of energy savings are we doing building it this way? Things like that. But this right here would absolutely benefit the kind of people who would like to live in a more permaculture slash lower tech kind of way, but still be sustainable. And I think it's a beautiful appeal to what they're interested in, the kind of lifestyle that they would enjoy. I mean, I want to live in a 21st century Jetson style, blow your face off with technology kind of city. I mean, that's the kind of personality and affection that I have towards that kind of living. But not everybody thinks like me, and nor do I expect everybody to. And so, what you're talking about here with this Earthship concept is a beautiful bridge that leads towards a different line of thinking, but can be just as sustainable, which I think is excellent.
thank you. That's exactly why I really wanted to bring all of this up anyway. I mean, imagine being able to like farm tilapia and fish right out of a little pond inside of your one of the rooms of your home. I mean, these are the types of like aquaponic systems that they have built into these homes, and it's not like you can't even expand on them further. There's one guy I saw on the internet I was really impressed by. If you just simply like YouTube search 1 million pounds of food on 3 acres, you'll find a really amazing little video about a guy using an aquaponic system and using tilapia and how much and obviously he was able to generate that much food in just such a small area. So it's not like these ideas aren't even just possible, but they've been things that have been people have been working on. I mean, Michael Reynolds' whole career is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, a justification on all the technology that is possible for us to move into this completely globally sustainable paradigm that the Venus Project talks about. It's and in using those sorts of ideas, these sorts of combined ideas from all these different multidisciplinary and kind of directions to draw from, it really pulls some things together. Like it's amazing how much science has brought us in so many ways to this new level that we can go in either this high tech direction that you're speaking of, or we could even go on this low tech version where people can still at the same time fish for tilapia out in the desert.
Exactly. It caters to different personality types. It's more dynamic, it's more diverse, and of course, the world is made of all kinds of different people. As long as we get those biological needs covered and the quality of life needs covered, whether it's going high tech or low tech, as long as in the end it's sustainable, that's the key word. That's the bit. What are you building and how many generations down the road is it going to affect? It's like the Native American proverb, every action that you take, consider the seventh generation down the line. And what kind of impact is your decision today going to have on them, a couple of hundred years down the road? And so, as long as we start adopting that level of thinking, whether it's high tech or low tech, depending upon where we're going to go, then yes, absolutely. It's just one more helping on the plate that can better mankind's condition.
Precisely. And we can have a lot of fun doing it. I mean, imagine this idea of there being a community where you actually get to travel around on log flume. I mean, just it may sound kind of silly to some people, but there are other people this may really appeal to, just because it appeals to that kid in them, and at the same time still affects the world in a positive fashion by being able to create a home that literally eats garbage.
Yeah, no kidding. Somehow I just got reminded. I don't know if anybody remembers this show, but Fraggle Rock and the trash heap in the in the back of Fraggle Rock, and suddenly you started like your home is eating garbage. I was like the trash heap is becoming the house.
That's precisely it. Yes, that would be a great way of describing it to a child, at least. That's for sure. Yeah, it would definitely get the point across to my son, who, by the way, I want to thank you for telling me about Khan Academy. It literally was something that brought him to another level. Also, in studying on his own, he got himself past some math difficulties at school. So thank you again for that.
Oh, well, great. I mean, don't thank me. Thank Salman Khan. I mean, it's his idea. I just love it. I mean, it's a great supplement. I mean, the Khan Academy isn't something that is completely 110% on your own and you'll learn the universe. There's always going to be, especially with children, there's going to be supplemental teaching. There's got to be a parent involved to help guide and maneuver the child along the right paths. But the Khan Academy is absolutely a wonderful tool that anyone can use to, if they're an adult, they can do self-directed on their own teaching and be able to self-regulate. But for a kid, it's a fantastic supplement. So yeah, that makes me happy that your son was able to use that and benefit from it. That's fantastic.
Well, the best part about it is that he's actually in an autistic support class, and it was the math teacher from there that specifically came to us and told us about the issues that he was having, and that definitely helped us grow past there. So yes, thank you again for that. I guess in wrapping up for me, I just want to throw out there again, like I said, how much fun these ideas of sustainability really can be. Even my wife's long-term goal, because of again her ties to this community and how it is such an arts community. She's hoping to even see like a community center that can also function as a dance hall made out of these types of sustainable materials and such from the earth ships, like building them with the tires and so on, and using the stained glass cans. And even one of her ideas was getting a giant windmill that could then be lit up with LEDs, so this way it's nice and cheap on the energy exhaustion. And finally, she's even suggested that even with the dance hall idea is that they could even put in a floor that can that can attract the energy from how we walk. I believe you described it as a piezoelectric dance floor. Was that what you had called it?
Yeah, it's piezoelectric effect. It's basically the ability to generate electricity through vibration. So yeah, whenever you dance on the dance floor, in fact, there are clubs, dance clubs that have this already. When you dance on the floor, it lights up the floor. So as you're moving around and dancing on the floor, you're generating just enough electricity to light up the floor. But if you did that in mass over the course of an entire dance floor or even on the sidewalk outside in a city, all those vibrations created by all those footsteps would be able to provide some supplemental power to the facility, to the building itself. So you have that plus a little solar, plus some vertical wind turbines, maybe some maglev vertical wind turbines on the roof, and voila, you're covering a large share, if not all, depends on how much is needed, but if a good portion of the electricity needs for that building, if not all of it.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. These are all these different kinds of ideas can be really long term, long lasting, and fun. And that's really what I'm hoping everybody has gotten out of the show today. Yes, it is going to be a lot of hard work to build this future that we're co-creating, but I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. I'm just saying it's going to be worth it.
Oh, absolutely. So let's go ahead and throw out some websites of some of these things so that people can go do some additional research on their own. I always encourage people to, learn for themselves as much as they can. If they have questions, these websites typically have FAQ sections, or you can contact them directly. And so, what's the Earthship website and things like that? Any websites that you think have relevance to what we've talked about today? Kevin?
Of them.
Kevin?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. Go right ahead.
Yep, I got you. Go right ahead.
Sorry about that. I'd say earthship.com would be the best way to go. That would be the first place to start to get the basic ideas. Maybe if you want to go on YouTube and YouTube search your Garbage Warrior film, that would be another great place to start, just to get the basics of where this guy was coming from and some of the struggle that Michael Reynolds specifically had to go through in order to get as far as he has gotten in his life.
All right, well, that's fantastic. Again, thank you, Kevin, for coming on to the show and sharing this information. I know a lot of times we talk high tech, but I have no problems whatsoever talking about some of these sustainable low tech options. I think that appeals to a certain demographic, and it's very important. As much as I love maglev trains and all those other fun things, I'm totally cool with this stuff too. I mean, for even every once in a while, I want to get away from the tech and go camping or something like that. So, why not go to a little town or a city that is based on the Earthship concept and kind of unplug for a little while and kind of reset the system. So, I appreciate the information. I really thank you for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. One of the funniest things that I think he actually said during the seminar was the fact that the biodome guys actually came to him after their experiment failed, and they said that they would look at a lot of his ideas a lot stronger if they ever got an opportunity to redo that specific scientific project.
And I think it would be a good idea for him to start partnering with the sciences and different universities and start really diving into some of the technicalities of what he's proposing and get some hard numbers. And you pull a little from column A and you pull a little from column B and you grab the bests of what really works. And that could only help him improve his systems by getting outside help to break it down even further and really get into the nuts and bolts. And I think that's something that people could email him on his website and say, encourage him, hey, let's get some universities involved and see what these energy savings are and what the long-term effects are and outgassing and what some of the negatives might be, and can we compensate and fix them. I think that would be awesome and definitely a positive way to go towards that. So with that said, thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate the time, ladies and gentlemen out there who've been listening to the show. Thank you for your time that you've spent with us here today. I really do appreciate it. Again, my name is Douglas Mallette, hosting today's show on behalf of the Zeitgeist Movement Global Podcast. My special guest today was Mr. Kevin Tilsner, who attended a fantastic workshop up in Pennsylvania called the Earthship Seminar. So you've got the information, you've got the websites. Get out there and do some research. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Take care. Have a good one.